You're listening to Cards and Cubes, a show about board games that you didn't grow up playing.
Thanks for joining in, everybody. In today's show, we'll be talking about some games we've been playing. We're going to delve deep into the depths of the evolution of deck building and board gaming. And we'll wrap things up just talking about some games that are on our horizon, or our collective horizons. I'm Trevor.
I'm Cristo.
And we are Cards and Cubes. So, jumping in today, Cristo, I thought it'd be good before we dive deep into the depths of this episode, we should educate ourselves just a little bit. Have you ever played the game called Boggle?
It sounds very familiar, actually, but I think no. I'll have to look it up to see what it looks like, but my first reaction is no. But I've seen it, I think.
Minus 10 points.
No.
Actually, so Boggle...
It's like a mass market game, right?
Yeah,
I think it's, it sounds like a mass market game.
Total mass market game. There's probably like a billion different app implementations of the same concept, but like the game is basically just kind of like shuffle dice inside this this dome and then put them into like a grid of 4x4 or whatever, and then the game is just spelling words and you just try to have the most words and then you win. So when you're spelling words, creative minds will always come up with creative words, including certain vulgarities, and I have to go back and test this out. First, I'll have to find someone who has Boggle, because I do not have it. Probably my parents' house. They probably have one. But apparently, fun fact for the day, in order to prevent players from using certain words, for example, the letters F and K only appear once, and they're on the same cube, which would make it impossible for someone to spell out certain words.
Oh my goodness.
So that's censorship in gaming right there.
Oh, that's actually hilarious. Can you switch the words or the letters around or something? Or like, what are the rules? Because actually it looks very simple. Yeah, like you say, it's like 4x4. Just kind of curious. Because I actually like word games kind of a lot.
So yeah, for some reason, I always get really badly wrecked in these word games because I just can't stare at that jumble. But yeah, so in a round, I don't remember all the exact rules. In a round, basically, you shuffle the dice around, and then that is the set of dice that you're looking at for the round, and then you have some sort of timer, and it's just how many unique words can you spell within the time limit.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's not even like rows or columns or anything. I'm actually looking at the cover of the box, which is kind of hilarious. It's like two people excitedly writing these words out, and yeah, I can see the words and they don't match up any rows or columns. I think it's just anywhere, which is kind of, very simple.
The back of the box is probably like two kids going like, yeah!
Yeah, exactly. That's what it looks like. It might be, yep.
Yeah, so if you were hoping to, there's an idea, Boggle After Dark. Then you can put the letters anywhere you want.
Yeah, like I say, I actually like word games. They're not super popular. They're kind of an acquired taste. I think some people like them, some people don't. So it just kind of depends. But I like them. Even some like mass market type ones. Anyway, actually, before we start talking about specific games we've played, I wanted to talk about a couple of just like random things that I kind of didn't announce to you, so surprise. But the random thing number one is I mentioned board game prices actually a while ago, and they were revamping their site. I actually use that site quite a bit to just kind of find, like when I'm going on a shopping spree, just the store which has the lowest prices. And they were changing their interface to be more like database driven and kind of like more like it looks like it's almost like the Facebook of board games or something, or they're going for like a BGG re-implementation, but more modern. And it looked really good, I thought, until last week I went there and I clicked on a game that I was looking at, and there's a premium account now. So it's actually terrible. because what their model is turning into is, I think they're only going to show a few stores in like limited price history. They also implemented price histories, which they didn't have before, kind of like a chart of what it used to be in like lowest price ever and stuff like that. And you have to subscribe for money to see all the stores in the full price history, which is horrible. So
Paywall.
Paywall. Goodbye board game prices, I guess. Maybe.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting because I remember recently on Board Game Arena when they made Hanabi part of the what is it, premium package. So you basically have to be paying the money to play that game, or somebody, whoever starts it, has to have that account. And you used to play that game a lot, right?
Yep. It kind of died.
And like after they put it behind the paywall, what happened to the game?
Pretty much a lot of people went away. It's still played, but it's definitely not the same as it used to be. And actually, like, there's a lot of new people playing it and a lot of kind of chaos. And it's weird.
I wonder what went behind the decision to put a paywall there, because there's a lot of other websites that do that in other industries. I'm thinking of Orbitz for plane flights and hotels. I'm thinking of Kayak, that I think does a similar service. And to my knowledge, you don't have to have like a paying account to access.
Yeah, I don't know. The thing is, I obviously don't like it. It's actually pretty cheap. I think it's like $20 a year or something is what they're asking at board game prices anyway. Board Game Arena is still pretty cheap, but I think they're just like really kind of pushing. I hope they kind of go away from it, though, because that's terrible. I might go back to something like Google Shopping or something. I don't know. The future is dark, because I really liked the basically exactly what that site did, which is compare all the online game stores like Game Nerds and Miniature Market and whatever. So sad. The other thing I want to talk about is kind of random as well. Recently, I was actually thinking about a couple of board games, and I couldn't remember for the life of me what their names were. Very kind of unpopular, and I just remember kind of the concepts and seeing them in passing at SaltCon. And I went to Facebook and I posted them, and I wasn't sure if that's going to be successful, and it actually was successful. Both of them were identified pretty much within like an hour to a certain popular board game group on there. So I thought that was actually pretty cool. One of them, I think my description was like mages walk around on colored spaces and they do spells or something, and there was a map or whatever. It turned out to be Archmage, which I kind of remember. My memory was actually bad on that game, so it was kind of a struggle, but we found it in the end there collectively. People proposed a lot of like colorful games that I didn't know existed with mages doing spells, so that was a interesting learning experience. The other one was actually kind of hilarious because we were just kind of cracking jokes and stuff, and it's a game where you feel marbles in a bag or feel balls in a bag. Well, get it. Anyway, it's turned out to be Stellium, actually, another game that I just didn't remember the title, but it's kind of a game where actually you're trying to pull specific marbles out of a bag, and you have like 5 seconds to feel them, and some of them are like rough or uneven or something, and that's part of the gameplay, so it's really weird. And it's this abstract game where you're trying to fulfill goals based on that. Thematically, you're actually building the universe. I think that's why it's called Stellium, and they're planets or galaxies or something or whatever. So you're pulling them out and putting them on tiles, and the tiles might rotate and stuff. And simple game, but yeah, I just couldn't remember the name, and that was actually really quick. I think that was like 10-15 minutes before someone got it, and that's pretty cool.
You've discovered. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how have you dealt with situations where have you ever forgotten a game title and like you just kind of don't worry about it or not worry about it? It just kind of drives me crazy. I have to like remember it for some reason.
I didn't. It has happened to me where I've kind of forgotten the name, but I have never thought to tap into the collective hive mind of board games online.
Yeah,
so
it's pretty cool.
You've discovered a beast that has, omnipotent power. I usually kind of just like try to type in as close a description as I can and hope that it pulls out buzzwords from like a BGG forum or something.
Oh yeah, that's actually the funny thing is I was gonna mention that because with Archmage it was kind of hopeless because I didn't have a super clear memory. But Stellium, for some reason, like I don't know if search engines like deprecate board games or something, or they like push them down or something. Because I typed in so many things like marbles, bag, hidden, board game, balls, galaxy, space, whatever. It kept pulling up Spaceballs, by the way, which is hilarious, which was kind of a fail, the movie. So, because it's very like the keywords, I guess I was typing in, but it never pulled the game up for some reason, even like beside BGG. Like I did a lot of searches, which was amazing. I don't know, maybe board games are hard to find apparently, especially when they involve Spaceballs. So,
Yeah. Well, I do
Yeah,
have one
anyway.
thing to say. You know, you've played a lot of games when you start to forget the names of them.
yep. That's the thing. Is actually the funny thing is I haven't played those games. I just wanted to remember the names. I really thought about getting Stellium, but I didn't because it's kind of a gimmicky game, and I'm not sure if it's gonna last. I just think the concept is kind of cool of like a dexterity element of feeling the surfaces of marbles.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. Board game hive mind trademarked.
Yep. So anyway, we can probably talk about games played. So, my games played, they're very kind of simple, and actually I have kind of a slightly amusing story about all of them except one. The first story is I thought this game was gonna suck because I played it solo,
And then it sucked.
then it sucked solo, and I was like, yeah, it kind of sucked solo. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't like I was like, this game is actually not as good as I thought. And then we played with Trevor, and it was actually pretty good. So the game's Village Green. It recently came out with. From I think it's Osprey. Gosh,
I think it's Osprey.
I'm not super prepared here, but also, what is the designer name? I'm pulling it up because I wanted to say it. Peter Sylvester, yeah. And actually, I'd forgotten his name completely. It's the guy who made The King is Dead and some other games that I actually really like. And it says Peter Sylvester's Village Green, which sounds like he's trying to like start a franchise around his name, and he's all that and stuff. And I just thought that was kind of funny because I thought it was some like first time designer, because I couldn't remember his name. But actually, I do like the designer, oddly enough.
People are starting to get his name tattooed on their arms and stuff.
Yeah, basically, yeah. I do like the designer, though, and he's designed some cool games in the past. Actually, I was looking at recently Polynesia as well, but maybe someday. But Village Green is very simple, kind of goals type game where it's kind of drafting. I guess it's like a market drafting card river game. Very, very simple, like really simple game. It says 189 on BG. I don't know if it's even 189. I guess it is kind of 189-ish. So it's just like super simple. You make a grid of 3x3 cards and you score them according to goals that are on the edges, like column, row, and you score the points, and that's literally the whole game. You're drawing cards from a river and goals. So throughout the game, there are some rules about card placements, but basically it's like make a tableau and score it. There's been a bunch of those games in the past, and I kind of actually don't mind them. I like this one as well. Not super impressive for anything, just kind of a lightweight game. Some luck, obviously, with the different goals, which may or may not align with you, but I kind of had fun with it. Very inoffensive theme. So that is Village Green, and Trevor also played it. I don't know if you have anything to say about it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because you've been bringing this game with you wherever you go. Probably, into dentist appointments and all that for like the past 3 months. I swear every time I've seen you, you've had the game with you. It was kind of funny because you were kind of talking it down as this like stupid BS game that maybe not that cool, and maybe that was just coming from your solo experience. And you bring it out, and it's 2 card rivers, as you mentioned, just drafting them in. but I actually thought it was a pretty fun little filler puzzle type game. It actually reminded me a lot of that Wonderland game we played that's from Renegade. I don't remember the designer of that one, but where you're basically kind of putting cards down into a shared grid of cards, and then you score based on adjacencies and things like that. But the cool puzzle about Village Green that I enjoyed, though, was the placement restrictions. Actually, maybe you can walk a little through that, because I thought that part of the game was probably the most interesting part of the puzzle.
Yeah, basically there is a kind of a timing element of the game, because the game ends when someone builds their village, so you're kind of rushing, but also the cards you're placing are subject to restrictions. Like, you have to place the same color or flower orthogonally, and that makes the middle card of the 9 kind of tricky, and basically building out your tableau, because you have to make all the cards match. So the struggle there, which is interesting or frustrating depending on what cards you're holding or have been revealed, is can you
there was no
out...
frustration.
Yeah, somehow Trevor actually had the perfect game. I almost had the perfect game. It was kind of delayed, unfortunately, which cost me a lot of points. But the struggle is kind of, should I try to keep trying to get cards or that work better with my goals, or maybe a better goal, or kind of play the cards that I have right now, because the restrictions are kind of limiting with what you can do. But it introduces a cool element, I think, of just kind of planning a little bit ahead, because in my hand actually I had like a chain of cards that I was about to play. So it's kind of fun to just kind of like think about, oh yeah, I'm going to place this here, and then this here, and then this here, and then this here, and they all match because the colors match or the flowers match or whatever. So I guess it could lead to, like, funnily enough, I don't know, in the level of this game, I don't know if I should even be talking about AP, but that could, I guess, with some people lead to AP of like, what's the better decision, and because there's a lot of options. I'm kind of really talking it up. It's a very simple game though, so very kind of family friendly. Some people, it's okay. Some people complain that it's solitaire. I think that's fine. With this type of game, I don't really want confrontation. It's supposed to be peaceful and villagey and green, and it is. So mostly
villagey and green. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And
anyway,
I suspect that at higher player counts, it's going to be just a lot more chaotic. Is probably what it would be.
Oh yeah, you can't like plan between what's in the row because the cards are completely different. So you just do the move which is good for you right now. But yeah, that's fine. What I didn't appreciate about the solo is basically you just play the same game alone and you score high score at the end, and that's kind of never really been super exciting unless I really like the gameplay itself. I think this one is kind of fun to just have another person also take cards so the row changes, and just kind of maybe looking at how they're playing like fast or slow and adjusting your speed as well. But yeah, it's a simple, straightforward game. I liked it. I like Osprey games, though. That's kind of why I got it. And I usually kind of buy most of Osprey's published games.
Yeah, Village Green was pretty cool. And speaking of villages, my game, first game played I want to talk about is called My Village. My Village Green.
No, it's just My Village. It's not My Village Green.
Yeah, we're totally coordinating the theme here, everybody. So for those who don't know, My Village is a follow-up of sorts in the same universe, although I don't think there's going to be any more games in this universe, of Village.
The Village universe.
Yes, the Village universe. Super generic medieval universe. This is a game designed by Inka and Marcus Brand, published by Eggertspiel. My Village is actually 2015, and Village is even earlier than that. I don't remember specifically when it came out, but so it's been a couple years. But I recently got a copy as a gift, and we've talked about Village before on this podcast, and have really enjoyed that game, and so I was really excited to try this one out, partly because it brings in dice drafting. So the first game's kind of cube drafting from spaces. This game is dice drafting from a common pool, and at its core, it's really an engine building resource management type game. So basically, in a brief overview of what you're doing, similar to Village, you've got a village board in front of you, and you have a piece that moves around spots that represent time. So actions you do in the game represent time, and so you basically, the time is one of your resources you spend in order to do actions. And on your village board, you have, I think, 6 different villager types. So there's like an explorer guy, there's a market guy or lady, or they're meeples, so they could be either. There's a church person. So there's 6 different areas of the board, and what you're putting into those areas of the board are cards that are sort of drafted from the middle of the game board. So when you set up the game, every card in the game is available to take. And so one of your actions could be to buy a card to then place it into your village, and each of those cards is going to have 1 or 2 numbers on them. And when you draft dice, you take 2 dice, and then you activate every die or every card in your village that has that same number as like the sum of the 2 dice you draft. So if you have a bunch of cards that have 6 on them, you draft like a 3 and a 3 or a 1 and a 5 or whatever, you get to activate all of your cards that have a 6 on them in your village board. So as the game goes, you kind of try to pick these cards and build your village out to where you're synergizing it and timing certain numbers together. So you can do a variety of actions that are kind of reminiscent of the original game. So you can get goods and sell them to customers. You can build your church and score points that way. You can sort of buy farms that help you get money. Thematically, it's all very much the same as Village, but the mechanics are different. And the game ends when it ends. I actually just forgot I think it's just a certain number of rounds. Anyway, I forgot exactly, but it's really cool actually. And when your time marker goes all the way around this track on your board, you have to select a person from your board to die, just like in the original Village. At a certain point, you have to. Certain of your meeples on the board have to die and go to this graveyard. Oh, and that's actually the end game trigger. It's once a certain number of people have died, that triggers the end of the game. So I really liked this iteration. Actually, it took the same theme and sort of the same mechanical ideas and put it into a dice drafting game, which felt really cool. I don't think you've played this one. Is that right?
No, I don't think so. And actually, I'm really surprised when you said Inco and Marcus Brandt. I was like, oh my gosh. Because when you've been telling me about this game, I thought it was a new game, which was released very recently. Because, for some reason I thought that. But actually, I've looked at this game a long time ago. When I was actually I played Village for the first time, I think like 16 or something, or 15 or whenever it came out. So yeah, I actually have looked at this game before. I thought for some reason that you were talking about the more recently released game when you've been telling me about this game. I can't remember details, but do you like it better or worse than Village? I think you like dice drafting, so maybe better, but I just looked at the ratings, and I think that's why I wasn't super interested in it, because everyone says it's kind of slightly worse than Village, maybe. I don't know, in some way.
Yeah, they're in the same universe, medieval times, and they
Village
have
times.
Yeah,
This is the Village universe.
Yeah, and they have the mechanics are tied to the same type of themes, right? So you have your travel action, your church action, all that. That being said, they feel like entirely different games, and
Yeah.
I really like Village, and I also like this one.
Yeah.
I don't know that they're apples to apples comparisons other than the title and the setting.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking at as well. Is there's kind of tableau building in My Village, and yeah, it kind of looks like a different game, to be honest.
Yeah, they feel really different. I think they're both games. Which game is the better game? Probably Village with expansions is going to be the I don't know if better is the right word, but maybe more interesting game. Village, I think, certainly feels like maybe the heavier game of the two. This one does
Weird.
feel a little lighter, but it's been a couple months since I've played Village as well, so maybe not. But this game is full of interesting decisions, I think. You're right. I don't think it got a lot of love, which is probably why it just kind of disappeared into the bargain shelf world. Because I think you can get it online for like $20 right now, so it's not super pricey.
It's actually kind of impressive that it's still in print. I guess they probably printed a lot of copies because it's pretty old. It's like 2015.
Yeah, 2015.
Yeah.
But anyway, I like it. I think it's a cool game. I think you may like it. It does. I'm gonna just kind of, my initial impression is gonna be I think it feels maybe a little lighter than Village.
Yeah.
But Village with the expansions is the caveat there.
Yep. No, actually, I'm open to trying it. I was just surprised because like I say, I've looked at this game before, and for some reason, I thought it was a new release, like 2021 or something recently. So, yep, I'm open to trying it someday. I like their games in general, so I'm expecting it to at least be decent. So, yeah, cool. My Village. Anything else about My Village or your Village?
That's it.
Anyone's Village.
Back to your next game. Better have Village in it. I'm really disappointed.
Village.
Yeah, their Village.
Anyway, actually, we were joking about it, and we had an idea of having a Valentine's themed game called His and Her Village, which sounds actually really good.
We're working on it.
But anyway, so actually, funny thing is, next game is tied with something I bought from the store, and I was really surprised at how expensive it was, which was dates. I hadn't even realized that there's like they're being really sold in stores. It's kind of a weird product, I guess. Maybe it's more popular in like more health-minded stores, grocery stores. But anyway, I bought
Walmart.
Expensive dates and covered in coconut something, actually. But anyway, and it reminded me of Targi, because in Targi, one of the resources is dates. The other two are pepper and salt, oddly enough. Targi is a game which I've talked about it before, I think. I just had a weird experience this week, which kind of brought the game to my mind, and it's kind of a weird game because I really kind of like it in theory. I think it's really well designed, other than some lucky things that can happen. But I don't always have the desire to play this game for some reason. It's not like you kind of have to be in the mood, I think, to play this game. Games like Race for the Galaxy cannot be just like The Crew or something. Basically, a lot of other games I can just kind of pick up and play anytime and be happy. This one, I think, like sometimes I just see people waiting on Board Game Arena for someone to play with, and I'm just like, because it's kind of an hour worth game of struggling through some kind of tight resources, and just kind of can be sometimes lucky, and I don't know, like
and
I say, you just have to hate placement, actually. Yep, because it's 2-player game only, so a lot of kind of considerations of just screwing the other person sometimes. But yeah, I played a game actually with someone, and this was like the trolliest game I've ever played, because I think I had like 39 to like 17 at the end. I think they didn't know what they were doing at all. But I was just amazed, because previously when I've played that game, it's always been just really close, and it really kind of unfortunately highlights some of the lucky things that can happen, because sometimes you win by like 5 points or less, which basically can be due to a lucky flip of a card with tribes and stuff. But yeah, this person didn't know what they were doing, I think, and they just let me basically just like the worker placements, abuse the worker placement spaces. The game ended really quickly. There's kind of a robber that walks around on the outside and blocks kind of the worker placement spaces, so to speak, and it's over usually when he is at the end of the game. But if you get 12 tribes, which is kind of the point scoring engine of the game, is getting these tribe cards with resources. Actually, basically, the game is place workers to intersect their lines like column and row and get the cards that they intersect. So it's basically collect resources for recipes, which are the dates, pepper, and salt, and gold actually, but gold is rare. And turn them into tribe cards, which tribe cards are the main point scoring of the game. So if you get 12 tribes, the game's over, and that actually happened really quickly in our game as well. I wanted to actually make it happen before the third turn, because I've never seen that before, like before the third corner, but it was actually on the round immediately after the robber turned the third corner. So I don't know. Like I say, it's kind of an acquired taste game, but a lot of really kind of, I guess, I don't know if they're really meaty decisions, but the whole system of choosing a row and column and denying that row and column to the other person is very interesting. Kind of a little bit of a struggle. Sometimes it's actually obvious because you really want something and you just kind of place. But there's usually kind of a lot of thought of kind of what the other person needs, and that whole system I think is very interesting, and that it hasn't really been done in other games, and I think it has some potential. I wish someone else would pick it up, basically where you place something on the outside and you get the intersections of wherever you place. There's been some things like that where you like push things in. There's a game that I played, I can't remember what it is though, where there's a grid of things and you push things and whatever comes out is what you get. I don't know if there's too many games where you place things on the outside of a grid and you get the intersections. I think that's really cool. And then they actually flip to the other thing. So like a tribe flips to a resource flips to a tribe. So it's just like really interestingly designed. There is an expansion for the game, which I'm looking forward to getting, which is creatively named as Targi, the expansion. That's the name of the expansion.
That's great. I wish all games were named the expansion.
Yep. Targi the expansion.
Well, at least you won't confuse it for like standalone.
Yeah, for some reason it used to be in Germany only for like 3 years or something, really long time, and then they finally decided to publish it in English last year. So I think I'll get to play it. But yeah, I think this is really solid 2-player game if you enjoy worker placement, and it's not maybe as mean as I'm making it sound. There is some luck mixed in. I think like I say, if you're evenly matched, the scores are probably going to be close at the end. And unfortunately, I think without the expansion, which I'm hoping fixes it to some extent, probably the person with the luckier tribes is going to end up winning, because there are some tribes which are really kind of powerful in certain situations, which give you a lot of goods.
From when we played it, sometimes the top deck just worked and sometimes it really didn't.
Yeah. Well, you obviously have some control, but yeah, there's unfortunately cards which top deck where like there's gold in your first, and usually when you're first you can get the thing you want. So situations like that are kind of just unfortunately happen, but I think it's generally really well designed, and the expansion should fix some of those problems. But yeah, that's Targi.
Yeah, I agree. Targi's a cool game. Speaking of cool games, the next game I wanted to bring in real quick is one that probably nobody's heard about. A little game called Seven Wonders Duel. With the new Agora expansion. So
did you actually play it?
I did.
With Ari? Yeah, nice.
I have played it, and spoilers, it's actually pretty cool. Yeah, I haven't tried it together with the Pantheon expansion, so I'm not sure how that dynamic works, but this expansion is cool. So just really brief overview of what the game is. It's a 2-player only drafting game, basically. You know, the Seven Wonders, the larger game, is a card drafting game where you're passing hands around. Seven Wonders Duel, you're basically in the 3 ages of the game. You're just drafting cards from like a solitaire pyramid and then adding them, either building the buildings and putting them in front of you, or tucking them under one of your 4 wonder cards, or discarding them for money. And what Agora adds is a board below the main board that is actually the chambers of the Senate. And it's basically a type of area majorities game, and it adds 2 new cards to the game. You have senators added into the pyramid of the the small cards that you draft, and the pyramid formation changes because you add in, I think, 5 cards to the first and second ages, and then 3 in the third age, because it accounts for having the guilds or the god cards in the game. So there are more cards in general, which means more actions. And what the senators do is there's 2 types of senators. There's either a politician who is like, I guess, the good senator, who basically the action that is allowed when you draft that card is you either place cubes into the Senate chambers or move cubes that are already in the Senate chambers. And the benefits of so there's 6 chambers on the Senate board, and if you have strictly more cubes than any other player, you control that chamber, and there's a benefit associated with it. So, for example, one benefit that I was able to hang on to for a good portion of the game was anytime somebody builds one of the blue civilian buildings that are just straight points, I get coins equal to the age you're in.
That sounds OP.
So, and then there's other ones that give you discounts on wonders or discounts on certain cards. One of the benefits lets you use the opponent's cards for the chain building. So on the red card, if like if Hristo had the horseshoe symbol on his card, and there was a card out that required that symbol, I could, if I had control of that Senate chamber with that token, I could use Hristo's building as the linking building to build my building. So there's some cool things that add a lot more interplay and maybe even engine type aspects to the game.
It kind of reminds me of basically those science tokens where you get a non-going ability if you get the science symbol, but maybe it's faster because you only need 1 cube in a chamber to control it, so you can do it kind of very quickly.
Yes, and then your opponent will try to fight you for it if it's good enough to fight for. So it's really interesting. So that's one thing. You can recruit a senator who is a politician, or you could recruit a senator who is a conspirator. And what a conspirator does is you can either just add a cube to any chamber. Senators have region restrictions. There's basically 3 regions, and you can place a cube in one of the 2 chambers that are in that region. So a conspirator would allow you to just kind of place a cube anywhere. Or you can take, I forget what they're called, maybe just conspiracy cards. And what you do is you draw 2 cards off the top of a deck, and they do really cool things. So one of the cards, you draw 2 cards, you pick one, and then you can put the other one back on top or on the bottom of a deck. So there's a new deck of cards that you're pulling from. And what it requires to actually play that card is you put it down and face down in front of you, so your opponent doesn't know what you have. One of your turns has to be drafting a card and just tucking it under that conspiracy card. And then on your next turn, before your main action, you can flip it if it's a prepared conspiracy, and then you do what's on it. So you can kind of slap your opponent with, with something. Like one of the ones I had in the game we played was exchange a blue card or exchange a green card, which you could imagine could have a ripple effect. If you had a green card I needed to win the game, that card could do it. Right? I could steal a green card from you. The trade-off is I have to give you one of my cards for that card. So there's this
7 Wonders Duel certainly needed more take that. So
yeah. But that playing those cards is a bit of an investment, right? Because you have to spend a turn to get the card, and these senator cards aren't in and of themselves worth points at the end of the game. So they kind of are in the hopes that you get something that leads to more points. And spoiler, I did not win that game. So it may sound overpowered, but it's not necessarily the end of the game. I thought this was cool. I thought it added some really fun decisions. That's what I liked a lot about the Pantheon expansion, was giving you more options to do than just pulling a card every turn. And so I think it keeps the game fresh. It adds a little bit more game, to Seven Wonders, makes it a little heavier and maybe more considerations. But overall, still a pretty snappy game. I didn't think it increased the playtime drastically at all. And liked it quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I guess Seven Wonders Duel is another game where it's kind of I have to be in the mood. Maybe it's a little bit easier to get to the table, I think, than Targi. Less of a commitment, maybe. But yeah, it sounds like basically a lot more, if you like, aggressive stuff and fighting for area majorities, which is kind of the theme of the expansion, I think. Yeah, it sounds really cool.
Definitely. Oh, it also does add a new win condition. If you ever control all 6 chambers of the Senate, you win.
I'd imagine that's kind of difficult, but I guess if the other person completely ignores it, yeah.
Yeah, I pushed that hard in the game we played, and and I got 5, so it is hard to do it.
Oh, I see why you lost though, because I think if you like, for example, push military or something, which or like science, and you don't succeed, I think it comes at the cost, unfortunately.
Yes. So in that vein, the game is still kind of it balances out. You do get points at the end of the game for controlling chambers, but it wasn't enough to win it.
All right, cool. The game that I've been looking forward to playing since actually last SaltCon, which was kind of almost a year ago now, which is crazy sad. I think this is going to be the first year without a SaltCon, probably, unless they actually do it. I don't know. But anyway, I saw this game last SaltCon, someone carrying it around, and I was just really interested because by Friedman Freeze, and he usually does interesting concepts, at least, if not always successful. I think his concepts are really interesting for games. This game is called Fast Sloths. So the joke there is that sloths are not fast, but you get carried around the board by other animals, and you're trying to collect your leaves from spaces which are mostly on the edge of the board. So you kind of have to walk around the whole board using other animals as transport, and they carry you to the leaves where you collect them. And whoever collects their leaves first wins the game. So it's basically just a pure race game. I expected it actually to be kind of more thinky. It was much simpler game than I thought. Kind of it's almost like a family level type game. It was a cool concept though, because the way you move around the board, again by other animals transporting you, you never actually move yourself. Like you never actually walk around. Is by picking up cards which belong to the other animals. So there's kind of a slight deck, construction or something. I'm like grossly playing it up because basically you pick up cards and you play cards. You're not like constructing a deck really. You're just constructing kind of a hand of cards and just playing them out, really. It's very, very simple. I don't know. It's like you're not like reshuffling anything. You don't own cards hardly. You just pick up cards. And sometimes actually the disappointing thing is I thought there was going to be a lot of kind of planning and stuff, and there is some planning, like I'm gonna use this animal. The cool thing is I guess the other animals like elephants and an eagle and like a donkey and a crocodile, they have specific kind of powers. For example, the animal the elephant kind of throws you with I guess it's like trunk or something thematically. So the elephant like throws you 3 hexes. The crocodile moves 1 extra, but he can only move next to the rivers. The eagle actually like flies or picks you up and flies from anywhere. So he's like really fast, but kind of you have to collect a lot of like value to trigger him as an ability, like 6 value or whatever. Every card has a number. So they have specific interesting abilities which make the decisions kind of interesting, but like I say, I thought there was going to be a lot more planning. Like, oh, I'm going to chain these animals together, and like I'm planning so much, and my hand is like huge and stuff. But most of the time, what ends up happening is you pick up cards, and you usually play kind of the same cards that you picked up. The picking up cards is interestingly designed though, because you can pick up only from cards from different animals. So if you want to make like a larger turn happen, you have to collect over several turns, because in one turn you can't pick up like the same animal, a lot of cards from it, and like do a huge movement with it. So you kind of have to a little bit of planning, I guess, but usually like 2 turns worth in our game. Someone did have a huge turn, but they did not win the game, and I think that's kind of not the way to go. The other thing that was kind of slightly disappointing is the game ends up being a little bit chaotic, because you depend on the animals kind of being next to you or close to you, the ones that you actually want to use. And what happens sometimes is someone else comes along and they just kind of take the animal away from where you are. So it kind of becomes less beneficial to bring the animal back, have it pick you up, and then go away with it. So it's just kind of we had someone in our game who was kind of left alone because everyone just took the animals away, and they're like, what the heck? What do I do now? there are mechanisms to escape from it, like the for example the eagle or whatever it's called. Gosh, I'm not sure if it's eagle or hawk, but whatever. That animal actually like teleports from anywhere on the board next to you and like takes you 6 hexes away, which is kind of an escape. But the problem that we had is there were no cards left for that animal. Everyone was hoarding them, so that person that was stuck basically had to take a couple of turns to collect other cards so they can just get out of there. Where they were. So, wow. I mean, yeah, the game is a little bit chaotic, and yeah, you can plan, but your plans can be thrown away because someone takes the animal away and whatever. So it is kind of just kind of a, like I say, family kind of type game. It
just sounds funny.
Yeah, it can be funny, yeah, but then like you're losing, so,
so that's you just have to keep a good attitude, I guess.
Yeah, that's the nutshell of family games. I think is like it's funny because you're losing, kind of maybe a little bit,
yeah,
and people just laugh at you. Just kidding.
And then I died.
Yeah, and then everyone took the animals away, and I was left alone, and I had to like take 3 turns doing nothing, just sitting there to collect enough cards to actually get away. But no. It was fine. The game has mechanisms to slow down the leader. I don't know how well they work. Basically, what happens is you, first of all, pick up fewer and fewer cards. So at the beginning of the game, when you have only 1 leaf, you pick up 3 cards. Then you eventually, by the end of the game, you only pick up 2 cards. I didn't find that to be like grossly slowing down the leader that much, because usually what ended up happening is, I don't know if you're like not good at the game or something, probably not, but you can only play 1 animal per turn. So it's really not a big deal to only be picking up 2 cards, I think, because I think it's like doesn't matter that much. Your hand size also gets reduced the more leaves you have. So basically, the more you're winning, the more the game kind of slows you down. But again, I didn't really find that to be super critical a lot. Again, maybe like we have to get better at like also taking animals away from whoever's leading. But nah, I don't know. The game is just kind of very simple and family friendly, I think. So, but I did enjoy it. I would like to actually play again. I think it's kind of really easy to pick up and kind of fun. And it's just entertaining. And I think you definitely don't play that game for the strategy. You play it for just kind of the fun and the experience. So I would actually play it again anytime. I enjoyed it, even though I didn't win. I thought I did okay. It's Fast Sloths by Friedman Freeze.
Yeah, it just sounds like a funny experience. I haven't played this, but it's on my list of games to get to. I just think it's hilarious and maybe a little innovative that the pick up and deliver is you're picking yourself up and delivering yourself.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yep.
All right. Well, those are the games we played. Next, we'll dive into our topic for for the day, which is the evolution of deck building in board games. So, when you hear deck building, what comes to mind?
Dominion. Actually,
no, just kidding.
It's kind of true though.
Yeah.
I mean, Dominion is touted as the first deck building game ever. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think it's the first game that like really focused on the mechanic. I think there have been other games where you've been collecting cards previously. I can't remember if some of them, maybe Asara. I don't know. Was Asara before? Let me just see. Before Dominion? Nope, just kidding. It was after Dominion. Well, anyway,
Dominion's
but
probably the
Dominion
one that's
is definitely the most well known. Yeah, exactly. The most popular, like you say. I think it's definitely the one that's the most well known. Most people, actually, including me, it's one of the first deck building games they play, because when you hear deck building, you kind of hear Dominion. And usually someone has it, and usually it's pretty easy to just kind of like play it and see what it's all about.
Yeah.
What does it bring to your mind when you hear about deck building?
Yeah, so Dominion is definitely sort of the first game that comes to mind when you're talking about an experience of constructing an actual deck within gameplay. In a more general sense, deck building evokes sort of feelings of engine building in my mind. So you're basically...
you're going to say feelings of anger.
So yeah, feelings of anger. I hate deck building games. No, it's what it really is. It's kind of funny if we're being honest. Deck building is building an inefficient engine, right? Because you're stuffing cards into your deck. And some games are better at this than others, and then trying to cull your deck a bit, right? So that the good cards come out consistently and in an order that allows you to have a good turn, right? So my actually first experience with deck building may not be what people really think of as a deck builder these days, but back when I was a kid, I played a lot of Magic the Gathering and Pokemon, and those are trading or collectible card games where deck building is not necessarily part of the play experience, but you are pulling from a large pool of cards, depending on how rich you are and how many cards you have, to build a deck.
I was going to say, I think Magic is definitely deck building. I mean, that is the deck building game. I don't know about Pokemon and how it plays. Or
it's
like...
the same as Magic. But like some people might say it's not technically a deck builder, because unless you're playing, there are game modes where part of the game night actually is you get together, you draft your deck, and then you play with it, right? But some people might say that, well, you build your deck beforehand, and then the actual like playing against another player or players is just like using the deck you built. But I think it's a deck builder because you can't play without having put it together first. So that's really my first experience, and the first one I remember in the more kind of traditional what people see deck builders as now. That would be Dominion.
Yeah, weird.
Sure.
I never had a Dominion phase. Gosh, did you say that would be Dominion? I thought you were gonna say that would be Magic or something.
Oh no,
I was gonna say,
yeah, my first experience was Magic and Pokemon, but then in the modern board game era of like you think about you picking up cards and adding to your deck in the actual gameplay. Dominion was probably the first one I played of that kind.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I never had a Magic phase. I think it's definitely deck building. Like, are you kidding me? Like deck building, it applies to Magic. Yeah, it's like you construct the deck beforehand, but also it's a deck building game when you start playing. Yeah,
and Dominion feels a lot more basic than Magic, obviously. But let's walk through just a little bit because we're gonna sort of the goal of this conversation is to see how deck building is implemented today versus how it kind of originated, and have a conversation about how the implementation has, at least in my view, and you probably agree, improved a lot and made games more interesting that use this mechanic.
Yeah, so my impression of Dominion is basically it's kind of deck building for deck building's sake. And yes, it was the first game, and it's still actually very widely played. So I guess the design is pretty solid. It has 5,000 expansions. Actually, I don't know if it has 5,000 expansions, but it has a lot of expansions because the kind of the recipe of the game is you have market of basically a set of cards that you can buy to improve your deck, and there's usually point cards that you kind of try to work towards acquiring a lot of those because that's kind of how you score points. The expansions might change some of this. I'm not a Dominion expert. I don't know. Some expansions have like take that and taking points away from people, so there's like more aggressive things that you can do rather than just like build up a nice deck and pick up point cards. I bet there's a lot of like other ways you can play, but generally the format is like kind of get cards which have increased buying power or effects or something, so you can get point cards, and
Yeah,
that's
it's
kind of
basically
that's it.
get cards to get cards to get cards. It's
Yeah.
that's kind of the rudimentary origin of deck building that a lot of people that's probably their first experience is a Dominion like game where you're just accumulating cards just because.
Yep. There have been some games which are very similar to this, but actually one of the first games that I also played when I also played Dominion were Tyrants of the Underdark and Clank, and actually Arctic Scavengers is another like kind of unknown game which I kind of like. I need to play more, where there is a board of things. Arctic Scavengers not so much, but Clank and Tyrants of the Underdark, they are focused on deck building, and the deck building there is not from these like piles of cards which are a set. It's from a river of cards, and then you use the deck to actually do things on a board. So the deck building is not, I mean, it's still you're trying to get buy power to get better cards, but the better cards are not because they score more points, it's because they have better kind of effects. And some of the effects might be in Clank's case, like moving farther, because the theme of the game is you move around the board. In Tyrants of the Underdark, the effects are that's kind of an area control game, which I'm actually amazed. I think you still haven't played it, right? Or have you played it? I don't know. I can't remember if you played it on tabletop.
Tyrants of the Underdark.
I think you're actually going to like it a lot, and we should probably play it. It's not a great 2-player game, but I think we should play like a 3 or 4-player game. I probably need to get it because it's probably going out of print. But anyway, that's an area control game, so the effects there are you get to basically either place more troops or destroy more troops or do things with like places where you control, kind of extract resources or points or whatever. So those games are kind of an evolution because it's not just about the cards. The cards are a very large part of the game and definitely drive the game, but it's also about playing on a board, and I think that's really kind of way more interesting. What is like the first game that you played on a board that has a deck building mechanic, or like a few of the first, Trevor?
Yeah, so one game that's maybe an in-between step for that. So I talked about it, sort of Dominion was kind of the first thing. The next board game or game that I played that was really deck building centric after that was actually the Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle game, where there there is a board, but the board kind of doesn't matter. The board is just a placeholder for cards. And I say it's kind of an intermediary step, maybe not to the level of Clank or Tyrants of the Underworld or Underdark or whatever that name was.
Underdark, yeah.
Underdark.
Tyrants of the Underdark.
Yeah, where that has maybe even a step further, right? Because you're actually using the cards to manipulate pieces on the board. Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle is maybe kind of along the lines of Ascension. I haven't played a lot of Ascension, but it's more you're getting a lot of cards and you're buying cards from like a card market to then fight things. So in the Harry Potter game, you're fighting these villains from the books and movies. But you're not really moving around on a board. It's really just still kind of a card game. So that was sort of the next evolution I played, and then I got into Clank, and as you know, I'm a Clank addict and have spent probably too much money on Clank stuff. But yeah, like then manipulating pieces on a board, and that gets into a really, I think, key evolution in deck building, which is the cards start to have multiple purposes. Right, so like on the Clank cards, for example, your card might have a boot on it. It also might have a sword on it. And then it might have like a skill point, which is the points you use to buy cards. So that was a really gripping thing to me for Clank, I think, and is why I still enjoy it a lot to today, is that there's more of a board game there, and the cards can be used for multiple things.
Yeah, actually, that's an interesting thought. I hadn't really thought about deck builders where there's multi-use cards as well. That sounds kind of crazy. Something like Kevin the Domain comes to mind, but I'm not sure if that's multi-use cards. But yeah, there's actually not too many that I can think of. There are some where you can use the cards for like its buying power or something else. Or yeah, actually in Clank, like you say, there's sometimes on the cards there's like two options. You can get like a coin or a sword or something.
Yeah,
I remember some cards like that. But yeah, there's not actually too many, so that's an opportunity. I think I can't think of like a super solid multi-use card deck building game.
Yeah,
which is weird.
Clank does it really well because not only are there the symbols on the card, but then sometimes there's situational engines where if you have a certain type of card out, so like in Clank there are these certain cards called companions, which are basically just characters that are on your adventure with you. And some cards say, like, if you have another companion in your play area, meaning you've played it on that turn, then you get an added effect. So there's kind of like synergies between cards, multi-uses. So I don't know that Clank was the first one to do this, and Clank came out in I think 2016. So it's not the oldest game out there, but it certainly has done it in a memorable and I think very approachable way.
Yeah. I think the companions thing is kind of a throwback to, I think maybe it started with Dominion, I can't remember, but for some reason I remember like guilds. So like the game encouraging you to construct a deck of the same kind of vibe or faction or something. Clank and Space actually has a lot more interplay with these guilds, so basically the game kind of encourages you to build some faction that does something specific, like, and the cards synergize with each other. So like if you have a card in your play area that's of a certain kind, you get to do something better with a different card. That's a pretty huge thing there. But actually what I was talking about with multi-use cards is I'm thinking of something like basically 51st State, where the card can be used to like be raised or be constructed or be I don't know, it's like some built-in mechanic where the cards can be used for three different things. For example, I don't know if there's too many deck building games with that specifically, where every card can be used in a different way. You know what I mean? Like in Clank, it's situational.
Symbols on it.
Yeah, in Clank, some cards can be used for multiple things, but it depends on the card. The game itself doesn't really have, like, in my opinion, a multi-use mechanic per se, but some cards definitely can be used in different ways. So yeah, that's a thing.
That's a really good point. I mean, this is a really common thing in deck building games, at least nowadays, where cards can become kind of a currency. So in a way, it's like that. You can use cards that make you discard or trash a card to get something out of it. So there's a semi multi-use aspect in that regard. But yeah, to your point, I don't know that I can think of a really prominent game where every single card you have
is
built into your deck
basically
is a decision of what do I do with this card. It's seems to be really built around what's on the face of the card.
It might introduce a lot of AP, I don't know. It's an interesting idea though. But yeah, to your point, there are a lot of games where the funny thing is they're really card games, and there's a board which just holds the cards. Actually, Arctic Scavengers is a game I mentioned that I played early on in my deck building career, which is kind of very similar because the board is mostly just to display cards, and the catch in that game was holding cards for a kind of an end of round battle. Skirmish for a reward. So it's a game where like you're not sure if you should play your whole hand out or hold some cards for like the end round thing that can give you resources. The theme of the game is also really kind of interesting to me because I like post-apocalyptic, and it's gathering resources in a like snowy I don't know. I don't want to call it the desert, but just a snowy land in the snow. That's why it's called Arctic Scavengers.
Snowy land, I like it.
Snowy land. Snowy wasteland, I guess I should say. Wasteland is the word I was looking for. But actually, to your point as well, there's an entire category which I feel like I don't like, so I'm not even going to talk about at all or mention, which is co-op deck builders. When you mentioned Harry Potter, I instantly thought of all these games like DC deck building, Legendary. There's actually a game which Brandon used to play before the pandemic, which I can't remember. It's Marvel. I think it's Marvel. Yeah, Marvel, the deck building game. Marvel, the CCG. I can't remember what it's called, but Marvel something. Also, there's a game which Aeon's End. That's the title. Gosh, I just remembered it. So there's which is like a really kind of complex. I think 2-player only, or maybe can't remember. But basically, you're fighting monsters. A lot of those games are kind of build up a deck to fight like either an end boss or monsters along the way and get rewards from them. It's a very common theme. And that's kind of a gameplay theme that I'm not super crazy about, to be honest. I don't know why, but I just don't like those games so much. I played DC with someone else's copy, and I thought it was okay. I thought it was fun, and yeah, it's kind of relaxing, but co-op deck building is not really my vibe. But there's definitely a lot of games out there which are focused on co-op kind of deck building.
Who hurt you, Christo?
I don't know. No, I just kind of find them like boring as a co-op game. Maybe I need to play a super complicated one, because usually that's kind of co-op games for me. Like the more complicated they are, the better they feel, because maybe they're more interesting. So maybe like Aeon's End I should try, but I definitely don't want to like buy a game like that, because I don't know, for some reason I'm just not super crazy about the concept. So yeah,
they kind of, I mean, this is one of the weaknesses I think of the Harry Potter game I played. Of the many weaknesses there are, we can do another episode on that.
Weaknesses in deck building games.
Yeah, the evolution of weaknesses in Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. Is that because it's not an incredibly complex game, you know, there are like different player powers. You know, each player character does something different as like an innate ability. But because you kind of know the world of what's possible, it's really easy to get into a situation where whoever's played the most is kind of just saying, hey, if you have this, you need to do this now. And it just becomes the game doesn't have a lot of interesting decisions, and it's just kind of feels scripted or impossible if you can't get the right cards, which is one of the main problems with the Harry Potter game, is that it can either be really easy or just like curb stomp you and break all of your teeth in the first round. So yeah, that's kind of an issue maybe with. I haven't played a lot of other co-op deck building games, but I can see why you might not like them as much.
Yeah. But anyway, do you want to move on to some other games that are more recent with deck building mechanics?
Yeah. So kind of what we've seen happening with deck building in recent years is really, it seems that you know, they're taking this system of get cards to get cards, which has become like get cards to do things, to then deck building almost takes sort of a sideshow or just a less prominent role in the game, where deck building is really just the means of like progressing the game. The first game that comes to mind of this genre type is that I kind of jotted down is actually Great Western Trail, where there's plenty to do on the board and lots of decisions to make that are not tied solely to your deck building, which is just your hand of cows. But there are spaces on the board that interact with certain cow types, and it's actually, I think, entirely viable to play the game without sort of focusing primarily on building your deck, which is why it sort of evokes this feeling of there is deck building in this game, but it's just a part of the game. So that's kind of my first experience into that, where deck building is not the prominent feature of the game, but it's definitely can be an important part, especially if you're pushing the strategy that needs those cards.
Yeah, definitely Great Western Trail. I was going to say there's a kind of a branch of games where deck building, like you say, is more kind of a side mechanic, but definitely important to the game. And I think the difference is cards themselves don't necessarily let you get better cards. It kind of becomes like more of a board game because you get the resources for buying cards from the board, or you just buy a card by landing on spaces on the board or something. Speaking of which, yeah, I guess actually there is some importance of card building, but I was going to say Blackout, Hong Kong, and Mombasa are other games where deck building is also kind of slower. Deck building, like traditional deck building games, what I think of traditional is like Dominion and other games of this kind, or Clank or something. You kind of play out your whole hand every time, and they're kind of fast. That's my impression of them, is they like churn through your deck kind of very quickly, because like I say, you play your whole hand out, and then you just do that every single turn. So you kind of go through your deck. There is a kind of a brand of games where the deck building is just slower, or you don't churn through your deck as quickly, because it's, like you say, more of a sideshow. And Great Western Trail, yeah, you hold kind of mostly the same hand throughout the round. It changes depending on spaces you land on along the way. You might spend some cards and pick up cards. Blackout, Hong Kong, and Mombasa, and games like Rococo, actually, you play out your cards very kind of slowly, methodically, with a lot of thought. And there is deck building there, but it's definitely like the way you acquire cards. It's may not have to do with anything on the cards necessarily. Like maybe you require a currency from the board. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of games where it's like there's definitely a concept of deck building, because you go through the same deck over and over and you reshuffle at some point. But kind of takes more of a backseat to some other mechanics as well, which I really like. I think it's really good. Yeah. Anyway.
And that's another thing too, is in some of those games, over the course of the game, your deck is really not all that big. So, like for example, in Hong Kong, Blackout Hong Kong, and Mombasa in particular, your deck is really a large hand over the game, right? And you're not going to have the whole thing in your hand at any point, because you're only cycling certain columns from your board, intermittently throughout the game. So, like you said, you have to be very methodical, both about what you're playing and what you're buying from the card market, because you need to, that's your resources for your action selection is the cards you've selected and to play out of your deck, which is just a large hand. So that's definitely, I think, a really important development in deck building that has allowed this sort of like uncontrollable, inefficient engine mechanic to become, I think, more controllable and lend itself to a heavier strategy game.
Yep. I just wanted to mention maybe some games that are more traditional that I've liked recently. Maybe because, they're kind of unique in some way. I like unique games. And then actually maybe we should move on to the main feature of our chat. I like Super Motherload. That's a game where it is a little bit traditional because, yeah, you do churn through your deck kind of quickly. The fascinating thing in that game is actually most deck building games you just draw. Like you just play out your cards and then you automatically draw. This one you actually have to take an action to draw cards, so a little bit on the slower side as well. It's very Dominion-like because there's a market of stacks that you buy from, but the cool thing about it is, unlike Dominion where sometimes it's a rush and sometimes actually a stack runs out, you buy from the stacks in front of you. So everyone has stacks in front of them, and the decision is just which order of cards you acquire. It's a game where it's not just about the cards. It's actually mostly how you use the cards to interact with the board, because it's a mining game, and you acquire the resources from the board to buy cards. So the cards let you drill the board for minerals, and then you buy cards with it. Very traditional game which you played with me, Famiglia. Very weird. What's his name? Let me just look it up really quickly because I want to mention his name. Friedman Freeze. I thought it was someone else actually, but it's Friedman Freeze, surprisingly. Game which kind of doesn't feel like deck building. It feels like basically a card game, but there are definitely deck building concepts. Very interesting, kind of almost like a climbing game, which is kind of what deck building games are, but multi-level kind of climbing game where you construct a deck of goons and you try to intimidate people and build like a mafia family. That's why it's called Famiglia. And you get scored it's kind of hard to explain how the game is unique, but it's pretty unique. Grifters actually I really like. It's a game where you kind of like play cards with the like delayed effect, kind of like a tableau deck building game where you play cards to a tableau, which is interesting. The tableau is very small. Actually, there was another tableau building game which you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I was just thinking.
Possibly.
I had entirely forgotten that we had played Grifters, and it had kind of.
You've probably erased it from your memory because it was a kind of a rough game for you guys, and
yes.
I was like, yeah,
that game lends itself well to knowing how it goes. But
yeah,
so like the mechanic there is you're like playing cards in front of you, and then they're like shifting to the right, and they have delayed activations. That's very similar, though not the same, to a game that just came out, which we're going to talk about, which Viscounts of the West Kingdom.
Yep, that's exactly what I was thinking about as well. It's actually kind of similar, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a game from Garfield Games and Renegade Game Studios. I think Shem Phillips and S.J. McDonald, I believe, are the designers. But basically, yeah, so you're building a deck in that game, pulling cards from one of four spots on the board wherever your meeple is. So that's kind of traditional deck building in that sense. But then you're playing cards one at a time every turn on a board in front of you, and each turn, so you'll have only 3 cards visible, and each turn they shift over to the right, and sometimes if they fall off the board, they'd have like a benefit that activates. So kind of the same concept of delayed benefit. And then the interesting thing that I don't remember if this is in Grifters or not, but in Viscounts, what is visible on the front of the card adds benefits to actions you do on the board with your Viscount meeple moving around. Is there a similar concept to that in Grifters? I can't recall.
No, I think Grifters is pretty straightforward. Basically, I can't even remember exactly how it works, but you play cards in front of you and they trigger, and no, it's very simple and kind of more oriented towards deck building, pure deck building. Kind of play cards to get better cards. And also there's a minor thing with set collection is where you want to collect there's like heists in the middle or something that you have to do. So you have to show like particular icons, I think, from your board or something, if I remember correctly, to acquire the heists, which are kind of better rewards, I guess, usually better than your cards.
Yeah, I probably blocked that game from my memory.
Yeah, no, it's much more simple than Viscounts, but it kind of has a similar vibe of like you kind of have 3 cards displayed in front of you, which is kind of an interesting concept because usually In deck building, it's just games you play out your whole hand and you just do it, and then it's the next person's turn and you reshuffle.
So that's a really cool development in deck building that I liked a lot from Viscounts, and I guess the shifting mechanic. Sorry, Viscounts, Grifters did it first. But those are two really cool, in my view, innovations on the deck building. I think it's really fun and interesting when designers play around with how cards are played and how you activate them, so that it's not every game is you play a card and you do what it says on the card, but rather you play it planning out to build some sort of engine or the delayed reaction or delayed activation that happens at the right time. I think that adds more decision points into the game and makes it interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a couple of games that I wanted to mention, and then maybe we can move on to something better. But Mac Gert's games, in particular Concordia and Transatlantic, are not super popular, I think, but I really kind of like them. They're very methodical, controlled, super tight, and very careful deck building games. Concordia is very unique because your deck, actually both of them are kind of unique, I guess, because they drive specific actions on the board, and you should be very careful how you build your deck, I think, because sometimes you need actions which... Anyway,
there's general deck building advice. Be very careful about how you build your deck.
No, I was going to say, they just feel, I don't know how to describe them. They feel as very serious and very tight games. Usually, I mean, deck building games are tight, but they kind of feel more kind of fun and fast. These ones are very kind of Euro feel games. I don't know, slower maybe. The consequence of decisions is maybe higher because you do fewer actions per game maybe. Concordia has a very interesting mechanic where the deck you build is actually your end game scoring. So it has multiplication scoring and pretty huge consequences of the cards you pick up kind of determine your end game scoring. So you should probably be very careful to build a strategy and a deck around something that doesn't suck as far as points at the end of the game. Because
add that to the list of general advice. Don't suck.
No, I don't know. They're very unique games, I should say. He likes, I think, rondel games, so they kind of feel in a weird way like rondel games, because rondel games kind of have the same vibe as very slow burn kind of games of make sure you sequence your actions the correct way, because once you pass an action, you can go back and you have to wait for a full revolution of the rondel. Very tight because everyone kind of does very similar things. I don't know. I really like them. I can't play them every day, I think, Concordia and Transatlantic, but they're really fun kind of games with. Definitely, you wouldn't really think of them as deck building games, but they are definitely deck building games.
Yeah. I just had one... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. I was going to say another really quick mention. Gloomhaven is actually kind of technically a deck building game. Well,
Stop copies me!
Deck construction. Oh, if you're going to talk about it, I'll just let you do it right now.
Yeah, no, go ahead. You're probably going to...
No, I just wanted to mention it. Again, definitely, I don't think of when I think of deck building, my mind doesn't go to Gloomhaven, but the cards and deck building concepts are a driving mechanic in Gloomhaven.
Yeah,
that's all I wanted to say about it.
And that's actually really cool. I mean, we won't go into the details because there's hundreds of billions of hours of Gloomhaven content out there. But I will throw into this same pot of this same mechanic of how the building and playing works is the Bloodborne card game actually kind of is a very basic version of what happens with Gloomhaven is, you're in Gloomhaven and the Bloodborne card game both, you're very limited in the number of cards you can use. So maybe if someone wants to split hairs, it's really like a hand construction type game, but it's a similar concept of you are adding cards to your hand and playing them. And in Gloomhaven in particular, this kind of goes back to what I was saying about I really like it when there's a unique way of how cards are played. So, as you're leveling up in the Gloomhaven campaign, you'll add new cards to the pool of cards that are available to you. And then for each scenario, you get to construct, each different character has a limit on how many cards they can bring into a scenario. And so you have to build the hand that you think is going to be best suited to that scenario, which is, I think, a really interesting process. And it's also kind of a painful process to select which cards are available to you, because some cards just won't be unlocked. And sometimes it's a hard choice because they're both good cards, but it also depends on the build you've been making of your character throughout the campaign. So that's really cool. And I mean, sort of a simpler version of that is the Bloodborne card game, where I think you can only have 5 to 7. I can't remember how many cards it is. Maybe it's 6 or 7 cards.
I think it's 7.
Yeah. So
7.
when you get a new card, you have to make a decision of which card is leaving my hand or my small deck now. And that, I don't think it's ever really a very painful decision, because you kind of, in that game, it's short enough that you generally have, if you're going to the Hunter's Dream to buy a card, it's generally going to be one that you wanted and is going to synergize decently with your other cards. Or your play style that you've been developing. So maybe not quite as painful there. And like I said, it's a short enough game that maybe it doesn't matter as much, but that kind of, Gloomhaven and Bloodborne kind of have that similar feel in my mind.
Yeah, just a couple of other quick mentions before we go on. I didn't think of it as that way, but Cry Havoc is actually similar to Arctic Scavengers, because that's kind of a deck building game where your actions are driven by your deck, but you also have the same decision of, do you want to keep cards unplayed so your actions are kind of weaker because they have battle effects for battles at the end of the phase. So, and kind of like Arctic Scavengers, like, do you want to play the cards for their effects to do better actions early on, or try to get better rewards in the end round battle? Actually, a couple of really solid, very traditional designs. By traditional, I mean kind of like Magic or Dominion or something, but really fun games. Shards of Infinity, very traditional, kind of build up a deck design, but I really liked it. I need to play it more. Just a card deck, very cheap and cool game, I think, but very traditional. Shards of Infinity. Rune Stones actually is a game which recently came out, which I really liked. Again, very traditional feeling deck building game with some asymmetric powers. Technically it has a board, but the board's more like a placeholder for resources and cards. I don't know. You don't really it's kind of funny. Like you can design that game without a board and it'll work just fine. I think it just looks nice. So it's one of those where the board is just holding cards. So again, kind of more traditional, but really fun. And actually a game which I thought was okay, and we haven't played it since it came out, which was Taverns of Tiefenthal. Pure push your luck deck building game. Yeah, I don't like it either. I'm not. It's supposed to be fun. That's the thing with that game. Not Witch's Brew, gosh, Quacks of Quedlinburg. Those games are supposed to be fun and just kind of enjoyable and kind of like pinball or pachinko or something type push your luck. I just don't find them fun is the problem. I find them kind of very serious with a lot of planning, and games where I kind of think they're kind of more on the serious side with a lot of planning, and you get wrecked because of you didn't pull your correct card out because of luck.
The headline
not good.
The headline
for me,
of that
they're
game
just
for
frustrating.
me was
just frustrating.
Yeah, I agree. Because the headline of that game of Taverns of Tiefenthal for me was "Do not pass go. Do not collect $200."
Yeah. No, like I say, they're supposed to be fun. I just can't find the fun in them for some reason, and I think I'm missing the point. And to me, they're very like serious decisions, tight games, which have just incredible luck. And that's what they are. Both Quacks of Quedlinburg and Taverns of Tiefenthal. Maybe I'm just too serious of a person for them. I don't know.
I haven't played Quacks, but just Tiefenthal didn't really resonate with me.
Yeah, Quacks is actually there's another building mechanic, which is bag building, which we didn't talk about, but I guess this is about deck building, but that's a bag building game. So from bag building, he went to deck building. But it's the same kind of concept. You build a bag, and yeah, it's lighter than Taverns of Tiefenthal, I think. So the decisions are simpler, but you can build a super cool bag and pull the wrong things out, and your round is over.
Yeah, I mean, bag building seems like the equivalent of every turn in a deck building game, shuffle your deck before you draw your cards.
Yeah, that's what it is. That's exactly how that game works. It's again push your luck, and sometimes you push it the wrong way. So but yeah, maybe some other time we can talk about bag building games. I actually haven't played too many of them, so that's why I kind of don't really have too many comments.
I haven't played too many. I haven't played too many bag building games.
I'm not a huge fan of the mechanic. Orleans is the huge bag building game, but anyway, like some other time. But anyway, I guess to kind of close it up, we did play 2 large deck building hybrid games, I guess I should say, which are brand new over the last like 3-4 weeks, which are Ruins of Arnak and Dune Imperium.
The Lost Ruins of Arnak.
Oh, the Lost Ruins of Arnak. Sorry, they're super lost. But anyway, a lot of people compared these games, and I'm not sure if it's actually fair or worth comparing them, in my opinion.
I think not.
Yeah, go into it, Trevor.
Yeah, I think that they've just been compared to each other because they came out at the same time, and they're both deck builders with worker placement. I think,
and in both of them you place 2 workers most of the time, I guess I should say.
Yeah, I think in Lost Ruins you can only have 2, and in Dune Imperium you can have up to 3 if you unlock a third. So yeah, they have
technically 4 if you're you.
Oh, that's right.
I think of it as a fourth worker.
Yes, there is a card that lets you move a worker from a spot to any spot on the board and just ignore everything. So there is a card that just kind of breaks the game and lets you do cool stuff, and it's a good card. Buy it every time. I think that's kind of where the similarities end, really.
Yep, I kind of agree.
I think that in Dune, you're going to be incredibly selective about your cards because you want to be able to go to the spots you need every time. And just to give a brief overview, the way worker placement works in Dune is there are certain symbols associated with different regions of the board, and the regions contain, at least 2 different worker placement spaces. And so to go to certain spaces, you have to have the symbol on your card.
A matching card, basically.
Yes, a matching card. You have to go there. Whereas in Lost Ruins of Arnak, it's basically a currency, right? Because an airplane can get you to the car sign or the boat sign and the boot sign. A boat will get you to a boat space, but not a car space, but it will get you to a boot space, and a car will get you to a car. And,
it's like a hierarchy of icons,
there's a hierarchy, so I view it as kind of like a currency.
Easier. Yeah, and it's also easier in Arnak. In Dune, it feels like a decision for sure, like how to build your deck so you don't get locked out of the spaces that you want to go. And Lost Ruins of Arnak, I think, is just easier. Kind of ends up easier because it's more flexible to go to spaces in general.
Exactly. And you can also do something you cannot do in Dune, which is you can buy spaces. In Arnak, you can spend 2 coins as if they were an airplane, which can get you anywhere on the board. Yep. So I think that the placement mechanic in Arnak is cool, but it's more of a hierarchy of a currency, is the way I see it, rather than you need to have the right cards and to get to a certain spot. And in that way, I think that Dune is maybe a little more thematic because when it comes to worker placement, because the types of cards that are going to get you to the different areas of the board, those cards are thematically tied to that board or to that area of the board.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. That's a large part of why I think the theme comes across more maybe in Dune as well, is because, like you say, I think the cards that let you go to the desert are like Dune, the desert planet, should be called Arrakis, but whatever. And like if you go to the Emperor, it's usually like Sardaukar troopers or something, or, like basically it's like the cards picture shows you where you can go and it kind of makes sense. In Arnak, it's very more generic, like airplane. And you can buy a plane with coins. So yeah, it's very kind of like brings the theme out a little bit. But yeah, to your point, I think it's kind of weird to compare the games because my overall feeling is they feel completely different. Arnak to me feels more like very traditional. Yes, it has a board and worker placement, and yay, but like
and a
basically, speaking of which, it has a track where it's called the resource track. I don't know why it's called the resource track.
I think it's
called
research.
The points track. Oh, research. Okay.
Yeah, but to your point, it is the points track.
Yeah, it is the points track, and you should kind of go up on it because that's a very large part of the game. I'm actually not sure if it's not the entire game to go up on the research track, because it kind of makes me think of like Dominion and points cards, which that's the research track. And yes, it's more interesting than Dominion because in Dominion you get a point card and it's actually a dead point card, and it's bad because if you get it too early, because if you pull it, it's just junk in your hand and you get nothing for it. The research track in Arnak, you get some resources out of it, and there's some considerations of like maybe chaining things off of it, and if you go really high you can actually get really good benefits. So you get something else other than points, but mostly you get points, and you should definitely go up on it before the end of the game because that's like the main scoring mechanic, and one of the main scoring mechanics, I guess, in the game. Yeah, Dune feels more like basically kind of like a board game because it has a huge area majority mechanic as well, where you score points by being high on with these like alliances with factions. Also, I actually really kind of like that mechanic of, again, a fight at the end of the round, because it's the same thing as I guess Cry Havoc and Arctic Scavengers, is you build up force. In the Dune's case, it's not card force, it's a force of cubes, which are put there by cards though most of the time, or workers.
They will be plastic someday.
Yeah, they will be plastic someday. There's an upgrade kit, but there's an end of the round melee sort of on the planet, and you get rewards if you're the bestest fighter on the planet. So yeah, I kind of like that mechanic. That doesn't happen in Arnak. Arnak is just like get your workers and cool.
Well,
there
there is the if you're on a bad space, you get a fear card. So there's a little fight, which you always lose.
Yeah, there's a fight which you always lose. No, actually, there's the Guardian mechanic. You get to, I guess the cool thing in Arnak is you get to develop worker placement spaces, which I usually kind of like in games. I was gonna go into it. Maybe now's the time. I think Arnak has, unfortunately, more luck in general, I think. And yes, you can kind of deal with it and flex around it. And it's kind of one of those games where, like, well, let's see what I get and then what I can do with it, as opposed to I can't really control so much what I get sometimes.
And what you mean by luck is when you're exploring the new... So, like, when you start the game, there's nothing on the board except for the basic worker placement spots. But when you explore a new area, you top deck the worker placement spot. And so you might get something you needed, you might get something you didn't need.
Yes, and that's basically kind of random resources. So you go somewhere, and you should do it because it's really good because you get points for it, and that's how you develop the board. And being first there is really good because you went to a better place than the basic resources, which is usually most of the time better. But you don't know what you're getting, which is okay, I guess. But it introduces things like, oh, I got exactly what I needed versus, oh, I got exactly something that it may be useful later.
Yeah, I guess you kind of get... Oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was gonna say it's a game where it's not a very long game. So like getting something that you exactly needed earlier is better than getting it like to use in the next round or something. There's no bad resources. You never get bad stuff. And yes, sometimes you get fear cards unexpectedly, but usually you get fear cards where you get better things. So it's worth it to get fear cards because you can do better things with them. But it really matters sometimes to me what you get exactly versus what you need later. So
yeah, and there is like a benefit if you're the first one. If you explore the space, you know at least one thing that you're getting because you're going to get the idol or statue or whatever that starts there, and you can see the benefit that's on it. So to that, in that regard, you get to pick your reward. But yeah, the worker placement space does just kind of flip, and then you get what's there. But whereas that would be really painful in Dune, it's not as painful maybe in Arnak because of sort of the hierarchy of placement spots. So if you flip a spot that you don't care to go to again in the game, you're not locked in because you didn't buy cards that have placement spots that match that spot, right? You just spend your placement currency elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that's actually kind of lucky in Arnak is you get a guardian who comes with the first exploration of the space, which is very, like, the game actually feels kind of thematic, I guess. Yeah, you're exploring a ruin and it's guarded by this mythical creature, which you have to defeat by throwing resources at it. Well, like paying tribute maybe or something, I don't know, to make it go away, but that's not super thematic. But the guardian you get is another source of luck in my opinion, because sometimes it's stuff that you have, sometimes it's stuff that you don't have, and
that's to fight it, right?
And most importantly, it can be stuff that not only you don't have, but there's no spaces left to get it. So you have to really think hard about like, how the heck am I gonna collect the resources versus, I just have them so I can defeat it. And yeah, the consequence of not defeating it is you just get a fear card, which is not a big deal, but defeating it gets you an action. So I think it's just like action efficiency. Basically, you can do something that's dependent on luck that's good for you earlier in the game, which kind of builds on itself, or not.
Yeah, I guess the counterpart of that in Dune is when you're in the end of round combat phase, you get dealt the random luck of someone has an intrigue card that adds 7 power to their thing, and then they just beat you, and you didn't get the point that you thought you were going to have, and all that.
The thing there is a consolation prize for second place, and those intrigue cards cost actions to get, so they're not like free. You're not just getting randomly screwed.
Right.
They spent an action or something to get those cards, which is a valuable thing, as opposed to you getting something else out of your action. So intrigue cards don't really bother me that much. Yes, they are trolly, but definitely they are a cost, which to get them, there's a cost, and if you got them, I did something else which was good, so they don't really bother me. Yeah, there's sometimes a nasty surprise, but you get second place rather than first place, and second place is still pretty good usually.
Yeah, I agree. It kind of evens itself out. Well, I don't know if it's even because someone can just win, right? But it does have a consolation prize.
Yeah, speaking of which, I think Dune Imperium ends up really close somehow with all the kind of chaotic things that seem chaotic. It's usually really kind of relatively close. Usually it is on a knife's edge, like the last round or two, if someone wins a battle, which is very precariously balanced, usually like by not much, they win the game, which, like I say, like it just feels really close and really tight and really what did Brandon call it? He used the word like tense. It feels very tense. Arnak, sometimes I feel like there's a little bit of like a runaway leader thing happening sometimes, and there's more luck in general. I think that's just my impression of the game in general. I don't know, for better or worse.
Yeah, I think there's more luck in Arnak. When I play Arnak, I just think Arnak is fun. Dune is fun too, but Arnak just kind of feels a little more lighthearted and not quite as Not quite as maybe cutthroat as Dune is. But actually, an interesting kind of flip is that I think that the card acquisition mechanic for your deck building in Arnak is more innovative than Dune, because Dune is basically just Clank, right?
Yep.
I mean, other than how you get your points to buy cards, which is, the reveal phase in Dune, which I think is a cool innovation. So there's the phase where you're playing cards as agents to put your guys on the board, and then whatever's left in your hand at the end of the game, that's what you reveal to buy cards. So in that aspect, it's a little new, but the card river is always just, it's whatever top decked out of the deck, or the main deck. In Arnak, I thought it was a little more innovative than that. How did you like that? The
Actually,
mechanic in Arnak.
yeah, definitely. I have a comment about that. I think actually, for how much I like Dune, spoilers over Arnak. Like, I don't like Arnak so much. I think Dune is awesome. I think I was really surprised by the high ratings of Lost Ruins of Arnak on BGG. Actually, I don't know if it's that cool of a game in general, but it's fine. It's not a bad game. It's just maybe not for me so much. But I have to give it to Arnak as far as the card markets, because I think it has the right idea of showing you kind of sort of engine building cards or like deck building cards at the beginning of the game, and throughout the game it kind of adjusts the amount of cards shown. So it has like a dynamic market where at the beginning of the game it's showing 5 kind of engine building cards and 1 kind of these cards where you have to pay costs to do better actions. And then at the end of the game it's showing just 1 engine building card and 5 cards which are you pay these scrolls to do kind of combo actions, and you try to make your turn basically last longer. Dune has kind of a problem in that respect, and actually I've even heard of people going so far as to like house rule it. I don't know if it's necessarily.
There's actually like a growing forum of variants for Dune to fix the card problem.
Yeah, because I don't know if it's necessarily a problem. I'm fine with it. The game still works. But if someone decides not to buy cards, the cards never change. So it can be very like stagnant. And actually what happened in our last playthrough was we had 3 copies of the same card in a 5-card row. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, it's like the exact same card 3 copies of. And the game never wipes that. The game never removes any cards, so it's basically like stare at the same cards and wait for someone to buy it, and you just like eventually give up and buy it yourself so that you can just reveal a better card. There are no bad cards. It's just like if you're trying to get the specific cards to do a specific strategy or looking for a specific icon, that can be frustrating to you. But it is kind of very, I experienced it last game because like I think both you and Brandon were doing a very kind of low buying card strategy, and I was doing a really high buying card strategy. So basically it was just like me buying cards from the market, and it was always kind of the same, and it hardly ever changed. It changed a little bit, but not as much as I was hoping it would change. So it does have that issue of like the card river never refreshes, and sometimes the cards are very stagnant. I wish there was something like you can pay a spice or a coin or something to wipe the row or something like that, or like people are doing something like the game removes the rightmost card or something every round and slide the cards. I don't know. I'm not super fan of house rules or anything, but I do wish it prime candidate for an expansion or something where there's something that kind of makes the flow of the row of cards better in Dune. That's one of the weaknesses.
Kind of the mechanic from Praga Kaput Regni, is you can spend a resource to cycle out not all of the cards, but some of the cards.
Yeah, I think it kind of needs something, or
well,
like
not
a
cards
card
in Praga, it's tiles, but
or like a card effect or something where like as part of playing a card you can remove a card or 2. Actually, Tyrants has that in some cards. Like there's cards which like are destroy or devour or something, a monster from the card. Basically, you just like choose a card and you remove it from the row and you top deck a new card. I think it kind of needed that. I wish it had that.
I'll bet you that it's coming in an expansion at one point, because I actually think so. I mean, you play Dune, there's a lot of similarities. You can see the same DNA as Clank, right, because of the same designer.
Yep.
And Clank, actually, I think in one of the recent expansions, there was a card, or maybe it was one of the different players with like a asymmetrical start deck, I think there is a way in some of the cards to actually wipe the card market or remove cards from the card or add cards to the card market. So I wouldn't be surprised if that were added either by a variant or in an expansion later.
I was going to say in Clank also, there is no strategy such as don't buy cards, which there is in Dune. So I think it's unfortunately more of a problem in Dune, because in Clank, like, you definitely want cards. It's a matter of like, are the cards showing better or worse? But everyone's going to be buying cards, which at least changes the cards. In Dune, there's a way to play the game without buying too many cards. And if everyone kind of conspires and decides to do it, it just kind of stuffs the market with the same type of cards or just undesirable cards maybe. But that's just card rivers, and it is what it is. But anyway, overall, I really like Dune Imperium. I think it's really well designed. Like I say, very tense. It ends up always being kind of close. It has a really cool kind of venging curve, which it feels like you're kind of losing at the beginning if someone is doing like winning a lot of early battles, but the later battles deliver more victory points, which kind of catches you up if you invested in an engine. So like really well designed, I think. Arnak, I don't know, maybe I had a couple of really just frustrating games, one of which was me just like not understanding the game at all, which was hilarious. The other one, actually, I
don't
built
buy all the blue cards.
Yeah, don't buy all the blue cards at the beginning of the game. There's a reason why they're showing only one. So anyway,
you didn't take hints from the game.
The second game was actually like I built the game around like a very low deck. Actually, I had only 5 cards most of the game, so basically I was pulling like, oh, guess what I'm gonna draw next round? Exactly the same 5 cards. But at the end of the game, I drew all my cards except one, which was super critical to explore the space, get a lot of points, chain reaction stuff, and that's a card I never drew. And it was just
the last
frustrating.
Card.
Yeah, I drew like 7 cards, I think, that round, and that was the 8th card, and I just couldn't find a way to draw it early enough, and that was sad.
Yeah,
but anyway,
at that point we had run out of like card draw ability.
But I don't know, just my impression is in general it's more lucky. You should not take it as seriously, which is awkward because it is kind of a planning resource conversion game where you have to really kind of look at spending things in the correct places, I should say, to kind of maximize efficiency, because you can definitely spend resources in worse as opposed to better places around the board. So find the better place to spend resources, which actually gets you points, because there's traps where you spend resources for no points. Feels like you're doing really cool stuff, but no points. So I'll always be mindful of points and then game scoring.
Yeah. Arnak, you kind of always need to be like, this action translates to points how. And Dune, I mean, you're kind of the same way, but there's not as many points to be had in the game, so you're trying to build a strategy around when do you strike and take the points, and then race up those the favor tracks with the different factions. I think they're both really good games. I probably like Arnak more than Hristo. I agree that I think Dune is the better game in terms of how the deck building is used, but I don't know. Arnak just feels fun to me. I like it quite a bit, and it's just a good fun game to play. But you're right, it does have a bit more randomness in it.
Yeah, I maybe need to get over the bad start with it, but whatever. Anyway, I also don't think, like, I was expecting it because of the high ratings of BG. I was expecting it to be maybe like super amazing, and it's actually kind of more traditional. I think, yes, it has worker placement and like these monsters, and you build the board out, but to me, like, when you really look at the game, it's kind of like just more traditional feeling deck building game, which I like sometimes, but I wasn't as excited about it.
Yeah,
but
I guess the one thing that does make it a little unique, and this is probably in other games, but there are free action cards, so you're not necessarily limited to playing one card on your turn. I mean, Clank does that where you have to play your entire hand and do everything, but this, Arnak has kind of a strategy thing of when do I play my free action cards and do I use them for that. Speaking of multi-purpose cards, that's a pretty good example. Lost Ruins of Arnak, each card can either be spent for its travel value or its face value. So I guess that's still just icons. So maybe it's
Yeah.
maybe it's
No,
still just the same thing. But
it definitely works. It's just that the travel icons are kind of easy to get, I think, and most of the time you don't have problems. But it is a minor decision. Yeah, I just I hope there's a good game coming up with like really significant multi-use card decisions. That'd be interesting with deck building.
Yeah, I agree. That'd be cool.
But anyway, so I don't know if you have anything else, but that's the evolution of deck building in board games, and mostly the Lost Ruins of Arnak and Dune Imperium.
Yeah, not necessarily the most innovative and like highly.
Just the latest, maybe.
They're just the latest releases in the genre, but I think there's going to be more really cool ones coming up this year and next year.
And yep, that's it as far as this section. So what's next, Trevor? You're the announcer.
All right. So that is our discussion on the evolution of deck building in board games. Next, we're just going to hit really quickly just a couple games that are on our horizon. Things we're looking forward to playing when they're released.
Yeah, I guess I'll start. Actually, I was gonna say Radlands. Radlands is
That's
a game
so
on...
rad.
Yeah, it's pretty rad. Actually, I think it's rad because it's radiation. I think that's what they're going for. Because it's a post-apocalyptic game. Raidlands. I don't know. Post-apocalyptic game with really, really cool art, kind of psychedelic and awesome, and mostly pink. It looks very pink to me anyway. I don't know. It looks really awesome. I like Osprey, and Osprey are the publisher. The game itself wouldn't usually interest me, but I just trust their designs. I haven't even looked at the designer. I'm clicking on him right now. First game. Okay, that sounds very promising. No, it's a simple kind of two-player only dueling game. The vein of something like actually Magic. Basically, there's camps that you have, and there's 3 of them, and you try to play cards in front of them to protect them and attack the other person, and you tap cards and do abilities and stuff, and there's water as a resource. Mostly, I just like Roxley. I like the art. I like the themes, so that's what interests me in the game, and I think I'll probably end up getting it just because I'm a fan. And mostly the art is really cool, so maybe I just look at the cards and not play the game ever, which is kind of what ends up happening with my games most of the time. No, I was gonna say, actually, we didn't plan on talking about it, but there's a game called Carnegie, which I don't know anything about. I don't know if you're gonna talk about it, Trevor, but basically kind of we're thinking about playing it maybe on Tuesday. We'll see how it goes. So
stay tuned.
Look forward to maybe a playthrough of that game before the Kickstarter is over. Looks really serious, actually. I'm actually looking at the playtime, and it's insane. So
like 40 minutes per player or something.
Yeah, like I'm looking at probably like 2 hours, probably more than 2 hours as the first game. I don't know actually anything about the game other than it looks like a heavy Euro, and it looks very involved.
Yeah,
and
I think it's about... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it's by Queen Games, I think is what it's called. Queen Games, which I also kind of like. Designer, I don't know if he's designed other than that. Actually, wow. Toi and Black Angel and Tournay. So yeah, my interest just increased because those are all really good games.
You should go back in now.
Javier Georges, Xavier Georges. I'm sure it's a French name actually, because I think Toi is like by French people.
It's French.
So it's probably like Javier Georges, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, a game that I'm looking forward to playing with hopefully Trevor before the Kickstarter is over, or if we don't, definitely something that I'm actually looking at. I haven't looked into it in detail, but it looks promising for sure.
Yeah, you should back this one. I've having my Kickstarter privileges are taken away. I decided to lock myself out for a little bit.
You are thinking about moving to a larger house, so like more shelves equals more win.
Yeah, it's a hard idea to sell though.
I'm just kidding you.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that one as well. I also don't know a lot about it other than that the theme is like the developing steel industry in the US, and I think there's some philanthropy in the game actually. Like charity work or something is part of the game. From what I understand. But yeah, I think we'll probably have a play of that up on our YouTube channel before the Kickstarter's over. So look forward to that. I'll just quickly mention two things I'm looking forward to. Recently announced there's going to be yet another Root expansion. This one is actually going to be a little more militant, I think. So it's going to be more, these factions that they're adding are probably going to be...
It's not militant enough? Like, how can it be more militant than what it is already? Like,
yeah, this game has no fighting whatsoever. No, I think it's these factions are going to be more about policing the board. So there's the warlord, who is like a rat warlord, and from what I gather, he's going to be kind of like a meaner, more vicious vagabond
Great.
type
the vagabond
character.
Needed an upgrade.
Yeah. So the vagabond is kind of like, you're just like wandering mercenary that may or may not fight you, but probably will kill you when you least expect it. And maybe the rat warlord, I don't know, is like, he's going to just be more in your face, maybe.
Yeah.
And then I think they're also adding in, what are badgers? No. Yeah, maybe badgers. Yeah. I think badgers, but I don't know exactly how they're supposed to play. I haven't read too much into it. I know they just did an announcement recently. But part of this expansion also is that's kind of intriguing is they're looking at sort of making the game more balanced for 2 players, which involves a different setup mechanic for the game. So there will be maybe a deck of cards. They were kind of showing prototypes on this video. But there will be variable setups or setups that are kind of more thought through rather than just like the
presets, like actually specifically how to set up the board, or just mechanics, like maybe like alternating between people for placement or something.
That's a good question. All I know is that there's a card system for setting up, and the card might tell you to do something, and yeah. So it's not necessarily relying on what the setup is on the back of the board, but this card thing that I think that their goal is to make it, a setup that accounts for all the factions that they've added to the game and that. So it sounds interesting. And then they're also, I think they're adding in these minor factions, which kind of seem like not full-blown bots, but like things that are in the game that can be nuisances and things like that maybe would make a lower player count game a little more viable if you don't feel like running a full bot, because they do have a Clockwork expansion with like robot players. Anyway, I really enjoy Root a lot, so I'm looking forward to that expansion. There's not a whole lot of details about it yet available because it's still just kind of in development, I think. And so looking forward to that. Another leader game that I'm looking leader games game that I'm looking forward to that should be fulfilling in the next month or two is Oath. And there's plenty of information out on the internet for people to look up, but basically this is a 1 to 6 player game designed by Cole Worley that has it's kind of a political game with maybe some area control aspects, variable win conditions. There's like a chancellor who's like ruling the kingdom, and you can either be like an exile or a citizen. So you're like changing your alliances to be with the chancellor or against the chancellor, and maybe you're going to win by scoring the most points, or maybe you're going to gain the most favor with the chancellor and then beat him at his own game. I have actually intentionally not paid attention to it since the Kickstarter because leader games tend to change quite a bit from when they're on Kickstarter to when they're released.
I was gonna say that game also looks very abstract to me in terms of like Root looks like a game where you just like you place
pawns on a board and like animals and they fight and stuff. That one looks very like political, like you say, alliances, weird. It's like the board doesn't tell you much about how the game plays, is what I mean. So it's like, I don't know. I haven't looked into it in detail, but it looks involved as far
and
as
it has
mechanics.
So something on that point. Leader Games, when the Kickstarter was going on, I remember them saying something like, teaching Oath is like teaching like 2 or 3 factions. Yeah, it's like teaching life. You'll never understand it. It's like teaching 2 or 3 factions of Root, so it's maybe like not as complex as teaching a full game of Root if you're playing with like 4 or 5 people, but I expect this game to be kind of quirky and weird because it's a Leader Games and it's Cole Worley, so I think the design is going to be interesting regardless. But and the game, just like the main selling point on it is they kind of said it's a game that remembers itself, which is really just a way of saying as you play the game more, you add more cards in to the game and set up
a legacy
different
aspect or something, campaign aspect.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it's campaign and it's not legacy because there's no permanent changes and there's no, I think, overarching like written narrative to the game. But it's more like you're building your own story as you play it. So like cards will come into, location cards, and cards are available in the deck will change as you play the game more. And so if you continue playing that same vein, that game without resetting it, then your gameplay experience becomes unique to another person who has a copy of the game.
Yeah, I kind of like that, I guess. It encourages you to play the same game over and over. Kind of evolving games. It's been happening kind of lately with not necessarily stickers, but just building a board or a game as you play the game, and then like storing those components in bags or something, and you can just set it up that way next time.
Yep.
Sounds cool.
All right. Any other games on your horizon?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Well, that will be our show then. Thanks to everybody for listening. Hopefully, if you have any other thoughts on the history of deck building and maybe something you think we left out, feel free to shoot us an email, or even better, interact with us on our Facebook group on Facebook. Just search Cards and Cubes. So that's our show, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks.
Cards and Cubes has been a production of Pod Cauldron. Check out some other great podcasts on the Pod Cauldron network, including Bub Club, a horror movie podcast, Rabble Rabble Rabble, a comedic look at current events, and Steady Diet of Music, a bi-weekly fix of opinions by musicians. You can get a hold of Cards and Cubes via email, cardsandcubes.podcast@gmail.com, or visit our website, www.cardsandcubes.com. We'd like to thank Kirsten Adams for designing our logo. Find more of Kirsten's art on Instagram at Cat Coffee, that's KATCOFFEE. We'd also like to thank Lindsay Hobbs for composing the theme, and thank all of you for listening, and we will return in a couple of weeks.